Thank you, Sanctuary Choir. Our second reading today comes from 2 Kings chapter 5, the first 14 verses. Let us listen for the word of God. Now Nahum was the commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Nahum's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Nahum went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So that Nahum left, taking with him 10 shekels of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I am sending my servant Nahum to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send somebody to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me? When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message: "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Nahum went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elijah's house. Elijah sent a messenger to him to say, "Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." But Nahum went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpah, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel's? Couldn't I have washed in them and been cleansed?" So he turned and went away in a rage. Nahum's servant went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you have not done it? How much more then when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, and as the man of God had told him, his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. I consider myself a shade tree mechanic. That means I can change my own oil and brakes. I've done minor repairs to my cars. I've replaced water pumps and spark plugs. In Holly and I's first year of marriage, I replaced a fuel line on the Ford Ranger that her dad was letting us borrow. We lived in a little apartment on Great Lakes Christian College campus, and I spent a couple hours working on this project in the parking lot with friends stopping by to see what I was up to. When I had gotten the section of the hose that had rotted and was leaking out and new hose clamps in, I felt like I could fix anything on the car. I came into our little apartment smelling of gasoline, and I declared to my new bride, "For the rest of our lives together, I will be our mechanic. I can and will fix everything." She told me to go take a shower so I'd stop smelling like gas. While I've fixed many things on our cars over the years, I've realized that I'm not a mechanic, and there are many things that I have to take into the shop. I still try to do the small things, but there are bigger things that I can't do myself. This past summer, our little car started making this awful rattling noise. I was able to figure out that it had something to do with the air conditioning because whenever you turned on the air conditioning, it started. You could hear me pulling into the church parking lot from Hagedorn. Normally, I would stick my head under the hood and see if I could figure out the problem. However, I have had enough of issues like this with cars over the years that I know it's going to be something outside of my ability. So I called my mechanic and asked for an appointment the next day, giving a brief description of the issues, including the sound effects, which I won't repeat now. That next morning, I dropped off the car and headed into work. Later that afternoon or that morning, I saw the mechanic's phone number come up on my phone. You know this is when you brace yourself. They're going to tell you that you're going to need to replace your entire heating and cooling system for your car. The radiator that is need to be replaced, they're going to have it specially made by a monk who lives on the slopes of the Himalayas. And so I was ready for this call. The mechanic said cheerfully, "We got it done." "Thanks," I replied. How much is it going to be?" And he goes, "Oh," he chuckled, "just the estimate fee. See, the collar around the fan had come loose and was hitting the fan. So we used 2 zip ties to put it back in place." They were so gracious, they didn't even charge me for the zip ties. It took a couple minutes for me to sink in. How could it have been that simple? Why wasn't a more elaborate fix? I had been even talking to Pastor Case the day before about how we thought this could be just a huge problem. But yet, just a few dollars later and a couple zip ties, everything was back to normal in that car. See, here today we have a story, Nahum, wanting this most elaborate fix, but coming away with the most simplest of one. The narrative lectionary takes giant steps through the First Testament. Just a couple weeks ago, we were looking at the life of King David, the second king of Israel. See, 1st and 2nd Samuel record the rise of the kingdom, including the lives of Saul and David. And 1 Kings begins with the death of David and his son Solomon's rise to power. In that time, Solomon builds the temple in Jerusalem, but then shortly after Solomon's death, warring factions divide Israel into 2 nations. We have the 10 tribes in the north that form Israel, and the 2 tribes in the south, Judah and Benjamin, which form Judea. And Jerusalem is found in Judea. 2 Kings continues to tell the story of both the northern and southern kingdoms, especially focusing on the prophets Elijah and here Elisha, his successor. This is where we find ourselves today in the text. Elisha is a prophet in the northern kingdom. Aram is a nation that has been attacking Israel for years. And this is when we get introduced to Nahum. He is everything that the people want in a general of the army. He is most likely tall, handsome, strong, and well respected. But there's one problem. He has leprosy. This is a general term for any kind of skin disease of that day. But what it meant in many cultures and society is that you were not allowed to be around other people. That you were often ostracized to the side. Maybe because of his station in life or his prowess on the battlefield, Nahum does not seem to be ostracized at all. He is a man of power and privilege. Next, we have Nahum's wife's slave. She was captured on one of the raids into Israel and brought back into a foreign land and forced to work in Nahum's household. It's after we meet these 2 characters, though, the plot moves along rather quickly. The slave girl tells her mistress that she knows somebody that can heal her master's disease. She is stepping out on a limb. She has everything to lose in this situation and very little to gain. If her master goes to Samaria and is not healed, or even worse, taken captive, this could mean mortal danger. And even if her master is healed, it is unlikely that her situation in life will change. But nonetheless, she tells her mistress about the prophet, and Nahum goes to his king to get permission to head into Israel. When Nahum gets to Israel, he meets with the king, who is not named. Nahum tells him that he has been sent here to be healed. The king thinks this is a trap. The Armenian kingdom has been attacking and raiding Israel for years. They have the superior army and are better equipped for war, and so he rips his clothes. When Elisha hears that the king is in distress, he tells the king simply to send Nahum his way. Nahum arrives at the house, and Elisha does not greet him at the door. Rather, he sends a messenger to talk to him. Now, Nahum has traveled all this way to see this prophet in Israel to heal him. We've all had those times in our lives. We have greatly anticipated something. We have imagined every scenario. We've thought about how every moment might play out. We know how we want things to go. This is not what happens when Nahum gets to Elisha. Elisha's messenger tells him to go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and he will be cleansed. And then you can hear Nahum's indignation. Elisha's not even come to speak to me in person. He sends a messenger to talk to me. Where's the show? Where's the spectacle? I haven't come all this way to bathe in a dirty little stream like the Jordan. We have big, beautiful rivers back home. And then he turns to head back home. But when Nahum's servant speaks up, he says, if the prophet had asked you to do something grand, would you have not done it? And with this prompting from the lowly person again, Nahum goes to the river and is cleansed of his disease. So a couple things to notice in the story. It is the most unlikely people to speak up who have the greatest words of wisdom. The slave girl, who should not have spoken up but did, to tell her master about a prophet in Israel. And then Seir, the servant at the end, maybe risking his own life or at least his rank, to challenge his commander's thoughts about leaving. They both speak truth to power and are able to get Nahum to change his ways. The second thing we notice here is what Naaman wanted was either to have a big to-do at this moment, to have Elijah to come out, to wave his hands over, to say big words and make a big deal and have him be cleansed. Or he wanted Elijah to tell him that he needed to climb to the highest peaks of the highest mountain, and at the top he would find a flower with purple petals, and that he's to bring that back down and make a tea and then drink it, and then he will be healed. But rather, he is simply called to wash himself in a small stream in Israel. He thinks it's going to be a complete overhaul of a car's engine, but Elijah tells him it's just simple 2 zip ties to fix the issue. It is often our pride that gets in our way of doing the simple things, small tasks that are laid before us. Nahum was an important person with big responsibilities. He journeyed all the way to Israel to see the prophet and had heard so much about him. Now the prophet doesn't even come to the door, like a father calling from the couch to have one of his children to send the solicitor away. So Elijah with Nahum. Nahum's pride is hurt. He knows that there are better streams in Damascus. He wanted something big to happen, and he was called to something simple. Over the last 3 months or more, my wife and I and our friends have been remodeling our main living space in our house. We have come up with a new concept for this area. It's called Open Concept. We're going to start a TV station about it and tell everybody about it. What we've realized all the way through this process is the small things matter. We've had huge holes in our ceiling that we could see the bottom of our roof. We've been waist deep in insulation on our kitchen floor. We've had huge things that had to be fixed, and those are needed. But there's also the million small things that we've done, the little things that had to be done to make the house truly into the home that we wanted it to be. People noticed when we drywalled the huge hole in our ceiling, but what only a few people will ever see are all the little things that we and our friends had to do to make the house look just right. We are people who do want spectacle. We want something that'll go viral on YouTube, make us so that we're on the Ellen Show, or even make the evening news. But often, God is calling each one of us to do the small things. Where is it that we can show kindness? Where is it that we can revive civility in our conversations? Where is it that we can listen to the hurting person next to us? I don't know about you, but I see the big problems in our world. I see the systemic problems that need to be addressed, and I want to know what I can do to help. I know I can vote, and I'm going to do that on Tuesday, and I encourage you to do as well. But voting is not, nor should it be, the only thing we do to change the world. While voting will help, voting does not check in on my elderly neighbor. Voting doesn't spend time at my children's school. Voting doesn't find ways of giving back to my community. Voting doesn't smile at our outdoor neighbors to let them know that we see them as human. And voting doesn't reach out to others to have a conversation. But I can, and we can as well. Last Sunday afternoon, we got to hear a lecture from the Reverend Tracy Blackman. Afterwards, there was a time for questions and answers. As we were talking about the metaphorical broken roads in our world, somebody asked what we should do about them. And she pointed to simple conversations, reaching across party lines, and having conversations with people you disagree with. And they said, it feels like we're just putting a pebble in a pothole. And the Reverend Blackman responded, yeah, but we need those pebbles in the potholes. Often we look at the brokenness of our world. When we look at the hurt that is all around us, I know that I get overwhelmed. There's no way I can fix it all. But I can put a pebble in a pothole. We all want to change the world, and we should work at that, but we should also listen to the voice of the prophet calling us from the couch. There are small things we can do today to show God's love. There are small things we can do today to show Christ's compassion. There are small things we can do today to show the Spirit's comfort. Far too often, these things will not end up on the evening news, and that is all right. People would have shown up to watch the great prophet Elijah wave his hands and say crazy words to heal the commander of Aram. But Elijah doesn't make it a spectacle. He asked the commander to wash in a little stream in Israel. See, I trust in Jesus Christ and what he has said this world can be. I trust in his love, his mercy, his grace, and his compassion. I trust that he wants people to work toward justice, peace, and reconciliation. I want to see big systemic things change, and I will work for that. But I don't want to lose sight of the simple, everyday, mundane tasks that God is calling me to. 2 years ago, my brother and I met in Denver, Colorado to see a concert. On the day we arrived, we decided to drive up Pikes Peak. Neither of us have been there since we went with our parents as children. I had rented the car, so I got the pleasure of driving. More accurately, I got the pleasure of gripping the steering wheel so tight that my hands could barely move at the top. If you don't know, Pikes Peak Highway is 19 miles long. You ascend nearly 5,000 feet, and you go around over 150 turns. Some where you see the road go this way and turn, and there's just blue sky above you. Now, as we drove up to the top, I say we chatted, but mostly my brother talked because I was too focused on the things around us. As we stood at the summit, my brother asked me if I had noticed this or that on the way up, and I told him I didn't see anything but the road. And then he reminded me, there was times I asked, did you want to pull off at this rest area or that rest area so you could look around? I was so focused on the one main issue of getting us to the top of that hill alive that I missed all the other moments. I missed all the scenery that was in between. Sometimes we get focused on one main issue, and we miss all the little ways that God is calling us to enact love, compassion, and grace in our world. I think we need to sweat the small stuff. Somewhere in our lives, we are Nahum coming to Elijah. We want this thing that seems impossible. We figure it must take some big, impressive task to make it happen, but the prophet simply tells us to go and wash ourselves. My friends, we all need to do the small things that can make a difference. The small acts of kindness, the small acts of love, the small acts of mercy will make a world of difference. My friends, we hear the rattling in the world, and sometimes it just takes a couple of zip ties to make it go away. Let us pray.